Generation Z, or commonly referred to as Gen Z, is a generation of people born between 1995 and 2012. Here is how the Gen Z edition for Harry Potter starts. Please bear with me. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Private Drive flexing that they were very basic. Thank you. TBH, they were the last people you would think would be sus, because they were all fax, no printer. Mr. Dursley was adulting at a firm called Grunnings, which made drills, and he was dummy thick with 3 C's, man with hardly any neck, although he had an absolute unit of a mustache. I mean, if that sounded like gibberish to you, then you're not alone. But for Gen Z, this reads as absolutely normal English. You see, every generation has made additions to language, but Gen Z, they went a lot further. I mean, they didn't just invent new slang. They created a whole another language and simultaneously a whole new identity. It's the first generation that grew up with screens and internet, and that has fundamentally changed how they behave and view the world. So today we are going in the strangest things that Gen Z does that somehow make perfect sense but seem absolutely crazy to us, the millennials. And we're gonna start with the most obvious one, which is their language. So read this. Bro got ratioed and logged off skull emoji. Try explaining this to any millennial and they would scratch their head, but to any Gen Z person, this is like the plot of a complete novel. It's like a full story condensed into 6 words and an emoji. But what exactly happened? Because, it's a completely new language. A recent article in The Atlantic breaks it down like this. Gen Z's language isn't just weird. It's actually a response to the internet itself. The way they talk online is built for speed and irony and hyperbole because it had to adapt to places like TikTok and Twitter and Discord, where you need to be fast and concise and just chaotic enough to stand out. There was another study on internet culture where Gen Z was shown similar memes with different levels of absurdity. And what they found out was surprising. They found out that absurd the content, the more Gen Z likes it. A meme can just be a picture of a raccoon with the caption he's literally me, and then somehow that is absolute unit of a comedy. But it's not really about what they say. I mean, it's how they say it that matters even more. Bro has at least 5 different meanings depending on punctuation. Bro is serious. Bro with a question mark is concerned. Bro means your brain just exploded. And nah bro means that you're absolutely about to be obliterated. So how exactly did we get here? The simple answer is that Gen Z grew up in a world where most conversations happen through screens. And when you're texting, tone is everything. How do you make sure that people get what you mean? You use emojis and you use punctuation and you use very exaggerated reactions. That is why a simple yes does not work with Gen Z anymore. It has to be yeah or bet or fax, no printer, and a casual no feels weak unless it's nah bro with the skull emoji or absolutely not bestie. And as I said, you have to be fast, and fast. And that means even no extra syllables. And that is why Riz has replaced charisma, why mid has replaced not that great, and why based replaces I agree. I bet that if you transport someone from 50 years ago to today, they would feel it's like a World War II code that needs another code breaking machine. But language isn't the only thing that they have flipped upside down. The way they talk about their mental health, I mean, that's a whole another level of chaotic. Point number 2. So I've been teaching a product and service design course for the last 5 years to bachelor students, which are Gen Z. And I have been noticing a very, very strange trend. You see, the whole course is about designing a product or a service for a very specific audience and solving a very unique problem. But every year I see a trend and the students are making apps and products solving just one problem, and that is loneliness. To the point that last year every single group made a project that was about being lonely, having no real friends, or struggling with mental health and just finding different ways to solve it. I mean, that was pretty eye-opening for me. So I dug deeper. I mean, in 2021, researchers conducted a study trying to find a link between anxiety and isolation with oversharing on social media. The study employed a sequential multi-study design, beginning with an experiment followed by a survey to test their hypothesis. And the findings indicated that feelings of social isolation and anxiety significantly increased Gen Z's likelihood to disclose personal information on social media, which means that the more you feel anxious, the more you have the FOMO or fear of missing out, the more you will be sharing on social media, even the most personal of details. Anxiety equals oversharing. And I get it that every generation has had issues with mental health, but with Gen Z, mental health struggles aren't just really talked about. They're built into their identity. There was a 2023 study that found that Gen Z has made like tremendous efforts to destigmatize mental health problems by talking openly about them. Their most intimate details on platforms like TikTok, and it's commonly known as trauma dumping. But the problem is that this trauma dumping can itself cause problems. It can cause re-traumatization and blurring of personal boundaries, because the recipients, your audience, might not be ready for all this heavy information, and eventually it might distance them, making you more isolated. But overall, it isn't necessarily bad. Being open about mental health, that's pretty good. It's way better than pretending everything is fine when it's not, which is how us millennials spent majority of their life. But it actually becomes a bigger problem in the case where it turns into commoditization. You see, Gen Z is terrified being judged online. They will reword a text 5 times before sending it. They will take a bazillion selfies before choosing the one they will post, and they will never ever dance in public, because what if someone is recording them? But at the same time, they're posting the most personal things online for millions to see and doing TikTok dances like everywhere. So how do these two things make sense? The answer is control. So if you tell your story first, you control the narrative. It's like a preemptive strike against embarrassment. I can't be exposed if I expose myself first, because sooner or later everyone will be exposed on the internet, as they have seen throughout growing up with the internet itself. And the thing is that the more you share, the more relatable you become. With millennials and boomers, we used to define influence by success, like who was the richest or smartest or most talented. But today, relatability is influence. The more you open up, the more people connect with you. Vulnerability isn't just honesty anymore, it's like a commodity. And that is why some people post every bad thing that happens to them, because struggles get engagement. The worse the story, the higher the reach. And when your pain starts paying the bills, that is when it gets bad. And we have all seen it happen. Like somebody posts something online, devastatingly personal, something bad happens to a person, and then immediately, boom, like this is my Venmo link and please support me. So yeah, Gen Z did a great thing by normalizing talking about mental health. They have openly spoken about things that us millennials and boomers could never even think about in a million years. They've turned it into an identity trait. And yeah, even though there are issues with the commoditization of it, it's still much better than, just what the previous generations did. But Gen Z isn't just redefining emotions. They're also redefining what it means to have fun. And you know what? Surprisingly, that doesn't involve alcohol anymore. You see, in the last 10 years, I have seen a gradual change in the party scene. You see, I have done my fair share of parties, and whenever I used to go out, I was always the odd one out, because I never really liked to drink. A decade ago, I would get odd glances and weird questions, and people would ask me whether I'm not drinking because it is forbidden in my culture or religion or anything else. Sometimes I was even told point blank that we don't trust you because you don't drink alcohol, and that means that you're hiding something. But fast forward to today, and I am amazed how normalized it is. It's one generational change that I've actually seen happening right in front of me. Now I never get any questions. More and more people I meet are choosing not to drink, and even this dance floor party hard culture, it's sort of died. And you know what Gen Z is doing instead of bar hopping on weekends? They're actually having something called quiet weekends. And here's the thing, it's not just weird anymore, not partying. There was a study that found that Gen Z drinks significantly less than previous generations. The rates are almost 10% lower than other generations before, including millennials and boomers. There was another study that tried to find out whether it is just a phase or it is part of a bigger shift, and they found out that for previous generations, drinking was about rebellion. It was going against the man. For Gen Z, not drinking is the rebellion. The real flex now is saying that, yeah, I don't need alcohol to have fun. It's the ultimate display of self-control and discipline, and let's be honest, of, again, fear of embarrassing yourself forever on the internet. Again, this generation grew up online. They have seen what happens when people go viral for the wrong reasons. Imagine waking up with a hangover and a TikTok of you doing something absolutely weird and crazy with 3.2 million views. That would ruin you. But isn't this the same generation that overshares literally everything online? And we just talked about Gen Z has no filter when it comes to trauma dumping. So again, why is it that the same people who will publicly document their worst breakups and their childhood trauma and personal failures also terrified of doing something embarrassing at a party? Again, it's the same thing, because one is controlled and the other isn't. Posting your own vulnerable moment that's curated, that's a choice. But getting caught on video doing something stupid, that's not your choice. That's like a nightmare. That's like the worst nightmare for Gen Z. You know, for Gen Z, sobriety isn't really just about health. It's also about branding. Because think about it, Gen Z curates their lives like a personal brand. Every aesthetic choice, every habit, every vibe, it has to be intentional. And drinking, it really doesn't fit the brand. Think about it, the clean girl aesthetic, no alcohol. The hustle culture mindset, no alcohol. The mentally stable era, no alcohol. Raw dogging as in not having any distractions, no alcohol. Sobriety is the fashion. Sobriety is the aesthetic now. And that is why you will see that non-alcoholic beverages are booming. There are sober bars, like alcohol-free bars and fancy drinks. They're all sell a lifestyle. Drinking isn't just about the act anymore. It's a brand. Sobriety is now a brand. But while Gen Z has ditched alcohol, there's one thing that they have refused to let go, and that is their phones. And honestly, it has turned into another problem. So while I was teaching, one of the most startling revelations I've had is that how allergic Gen Z is to laptops. It's not just a preference. They full on avoid laptops. I was amazed to see that they will edit their entire assignments on, actual documents on their phones. Full essay formatting, slides and citations, everything on a phone screen. And I can't even begin to imagine how they do it, but somehow that is the way that they prefer to do it. And this isn't just my observation. There are studies showing that Gen Z is the first truly mobile first generation. There was a study that found that they rely on touchscreens so much that traditional desktop workflows feel unintuitive. A laptop isn't just old school. It's clunky now. There was another study that explains how Gen Z thinks when it comes to devices. And they don't approach technology the same way previous generations do. They don't think about files and folders. They think in terms of apps. Why store something when you can just search for it again? Why navigate a desktop? An app can do it faster. And this, creates a paradox. It's the most digitally connected generation. And yet, if you ask them to attach a PDF, they'll struggle. They can make full PowerPoint on their phone, but tell them to find a file on a desktop and they will panic. Not really about intelligence. It's about intuitions. Us millennials and older generations had to learn computers from the ground up. So using desktops feels second nature. But Gen Z, they grew up in an ecosystem that skipped that step. They don't need to manually organize files because cloud storage does it for them. They don't need desktop software when an app can do it in seconds. And honestly, they might not even have to learn this, because here's the thing. Why struggle with laptops when everything is already moving past them? Think about it. Work is shifting to mobile apps, cloud-based systems, and AI automation. A decade from now, anyone be manually sorting files, or your entire workflow will be voice activated or AI assisted. Gen Z isn't really bad at tech. They're sort of just optimized for the future. And the only reason it feels like a problem is because they're still forced to work in a world that hasn't really caught up to them. So yeah, Gen Z might struggle with laptops, but if you want to be real, then laptops are starting to feel like fax machines of the digital age. Okay, if we speak of outdated systems, there is one thing that is absolutely relatable to Gen Z, and that is their relationship with capitalism. Okay, so if you ever scroll through social media, like Gen Z social media, like TikTok, you will feel like Gen Z really hates capitalism. They're out there making fun of corporate life, and they're making fun of landlords and posting memes I do not dream of labor. But at the same time, they're actively participating in capitalism more than ever. They're side hustling, they're personal branding, they're flipping thrift store finds, they're launching Etsy shops, and even investing in stocks before they graduate. There was a 2021 study on Gen Z consumer habits that found that while they frequently critique capitalism online, they're also the most financially engaged generation, participating in digital economies and freelance work and e-commerce at higher rates than millennials and Gen X. The study, which surveyed over 5,000 young adults across North America and Europe, it found that Gen Z overwhelmingly distrust traditional job security, but they actually embrace alternative income streams, like for example gig work and creator monetization, and for example investing in crypto and stocks. There was another study in 2022 that talked about the spending behavior that Gen Z does, and Gen Z wants to reject capitalism, but they also care deeply about where their money goes instead of spending spending less, they're more likely to support brands that align with their personal values like sustainability or social justice and fair labor practices. So basically, they don't reject capitalism, even though they say that. They just want a version of it that feels less exploitative. And it makes sense because Gen Z grew up in a financial crisis, a student debt crisis, and a housing crisis. They watched millennials get burned by corporate loyalty. So yeah, of course, they're not going to pretend that traditional careers are going to save them. That is why their dream job isn't really climbing the corporate ladder. It's actually turning yourself into a brand and monetizing yourself. And that is why so many Gen Zers are turning themselves into brands, whether it is through content creation or reselling or coaching or starting niche businesses. And they're just finding ways to own their income. And you know what the funny part is? Gen Z makes fun of the hustle culture, yet they fully participate in it. They will be like, capitalism is a scam, and then turn around and sell digital templates for $14.99. They will tweet like 95 jobs are soul crushing and then go on TikTok and talk about 5 passive income streams you will need in 2025. Because at the end of the day, it's not that Gen Z hates capitalism. They just don't trust it to work in their favor. So yeah, Gen Z is navigating a broken system, making fun of it the entire time and somehow still playing the same game. If there is one thing that Gen Z does well, it's taking an outdated system, flipping it on its head and turning it into completely their own. And I think that pretty much describes this entire generation. So here were the few things that seem absolutely crazy to us millennials, but completely normal for Gen Z. By the way, if you want to know why in the Soviet Union children knew more about military practice than you ever did, then watch this video here. If you want to know why in Canada there is a polar bear jail, then you might want to have a look at this video. And if you want to see the craziest foods that you can find in NYC, then have a look here. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.